Well, I didn't work directly for him. He was the Apple III product manager that started it back in 1980, and this was in 1983. And so they asked me to move over from the peripherals division and the hard drives and the floppy drives to the personal computer systems division and
Mhm.
become the group product manager for the Apple III. I said, sure, but there's all kinds of rumors circulating around the country that you're just going to cancel the product line.
Yeah.
28 or 256 kilobytes. And so it was a huge spreadsheet. The whole company was run on Apple IIIs at that time. He says, Dave, we have $30 million worth of piece parts
Mhm.
spread amongst those three manufacturing facilities. What should we do about it? And I said, what do you mean we, paleface? And Jobs had convinced the executive committee to cancel the product line because Steve Jobs 1.0 did not understand the notion of cannibalizing your own product.
Mhm.
He felt that the Apple III occupied a space in the office business market that has yet to be introduced, yet to be shipped. Macintosh wanted to
Mhm.
occupy. So if he get rid of the Apple III, then he'll have that market all to himself. Their resources and trying to make money off the Apple III.
Mhm.
And we'd like you to be the business unit manager. I said, I can't be the general manager. He says, no, you have to be the business unit manager. I said, so you want to call me a bum for short?
Yeah.
And they refused to budge. So I took the bum job.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using Newcalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
David Fradin, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So, with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about the amazing things that you're doing to help people learn how to make their products a success. Thanks for being here, bud.
Glad to be with you.
So, where were you born?
I was born in Detroit in 1951.
Yeah,
Grew up in Detroit during the go-go years of the automotive industry.
that really was a wild time.
And it was very similar to what Silicon Valley used to be
Yeah.
in terms of the ease of networking, the ease of getting business, and so forth. Also became Motown at the time. And one of my early experiences is I joined the Civil Air Patrol, learned how to fly, became a captain in the Civil Air Patrol. And then I went away to high school at Cass Technical High School in downtown Detroit, which was honors high school. And I think, no, a little bit later, after I went on to the University of Michigan and started the flying club there, which is still in business today, over 50 years later. And it's
Wow.
trained over 5,000 pilots, including the head of the Blue Angels.
Oh, that's awesome.
And worked my way through the last couple of years in college as a flight instructor, which was kind of exciting to go out with a student and do spins and power off emergency landings that have to go to an English grammar class in the afternoon, which
But
yeah,
a little bit of a change.
yeah, it was sleep enhancing. And then
Because you had all that adrenaline going in the morning, right? You're like worn out in the afternoon.
yeah, then my sophomore year in college, my aerospace engineering professor, Wilbur Nelson, said, I notice you know how to organize. Would you like to organize a nationwide student organization in favor of the American supersonic transport? And I said, not knowing what I was getting myself into, I said, sure. I started it, got about 40 chapters, about 15,000 members around the country. It ended up going to Washington, D.C. about a month out of every school year to lobby Congress, first for the SST, testify before the House Committee on astronautics and aeronautics in favor of the SST, and even appeared on a radio show, WABC in downtown Detroit, just before the Supremes. So I had a chance to meet Diana Ross and the rest of them.
Wow. So you were there and they were there.
They were there. Yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
I think they came to listen in on what I had to say. I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
absolutely. Absolutely. They're all about supersonic travel.
My high school was only about 3 or 4 miles from where Aretha Franklin was going to high school at the same time.
Oh, wow.
But since I couldn't sing, I never met her.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to meetings and cocktail parties in my pink polyester suit, which was the fad in the early 70s. And met a fellow by the name of William S. Magruder, who was the head of the Department of Transportation's Supersonic Transport Committee. And this was the first time in the history of the country that an aeronautical technology innovation and development was being funded out of civilian dollars rather than coming out of the Department of Defense.
Wow.
Because aircraft like the Boeing 707, the 737, the 747, the DC-10, and so forth, used engines that were developed by DoD, used airframes and so forth from DoD aircraft development. And Bill was also a test pilot. He was the chief test pilot on the B-52.
Ooh.
And plus 130 some other helicopters and airplanes. And on the first test flight of the B-52, he took off from, I think it was Edwards Air Force Base in Southern California, and flew it back to the Boeing factory in Seattle and landed gear up, which usually resorts in a court martial, and they kick you out of the Air Force. But he thoroughly examined what was going on, and there was a defect in the landing gear, which required an additional part. So he designed a part to go into the B-52 so it wouldn't land gear up. Unbeknownst to the pilot, he apparently had a gear down notice and didn't know that the gear was still not deployed.
Wow.
And it's the only part in the U.S. Air Force inventory called the Magruder in his honor.
Wow. That's incredible. What a great story.
So he became my mentor and helped me out with my student organization all through college. And then when I graduated from college, I moved the headquarters to Columbia, Maryland, and then later to downtown Washington. And Bill, after the SST was shot down by Congress, felt that it was pretty much a anti-technology feeling that was going around, where environmentalists were blaming technology for the environment's ills, not recognizing the fact that technology, the definition of it, is the organization of knowledge for practical purposes.
Right.
So you could use technology for good, or you could use technology for bad. It doesn't really matter. It's up to the people and the values of the people that are deploying it and using it. So we changed the name from Fly America's SST, or FAST, to Federation of Americans Supporting Science and Technology. It's a very useful acronym. Continued the chapters, continued to raise money. I got funding from major aerospace, oil, natural gas, utility companies, the Electric Power Research Institute, and so forth, and went on to lobby Congress to get the space shuttle built, which we were successful on, and also lobbied Congress on Project Independence so that we wouldn't be dependent on foreign oil, because around that time in '73 was the big oil embargo after the Israeli-Arab war. So after a while in Washington and doing those things as a student, I felt I couldn't be a student anymore. So I started looking around, and Syl Laskin, who is the chairman of the board of Minnesota Power and Light, who is also funding my FAST organization, asked me to come to Minnesota and be the executive vice president of the Environmental Balance Association. So we had 225 labor, business, and agricultural organizations that were financing it. And we sought to balance the needs of energy, the economy, and the environment, rather than going all out for just one of those three.
Right.
And in my endeavors there, I discovered that the process of mediation is better appropriate to resolve economic, environmental, and energy disputes than litigation.
Right.
Because litigation is based upon 0-1, yes, no, guilty, not guilty, where mediation is the effort to come up with a shared set of agreements
Right.
and agree respectfully and work on a solution to the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I mediated the environmental ballot of the Moorhead Malthouse dispute, where Anheuser-Busch wanted to build a malting facility in Moorhead, Minnesota. And based upon that success, Governor Perpich and later Governor Quee asked me to try to mediate the reserve mining dispute, which was the granddaddy at that time of all the environmental disputes in the world, where Armco or Republic Steel and I forget the other name of the other steel company formed a joint effort called Reserve Mining. And by that time, especially after World War II, the major iron ore in the northeastern Minnesota and the Wasabi Range was depleted. So they were using lower iron ore concentrations in the rock, which is called taconite, and they would dig it up about 55 miles away from Lake Superior, ship it by rail to Lake Superior, grind it, flush it out with tons of Lake Superior water, extract the iron ore with huge magnets, and then dump the tailings into Lake Superior. And their design felt that since the water with the tailings was denser than Lake Superior, it would just come off the chute about a foot or two above the water and immediately go to the bottom of Lake Superior where there's a huge trench. Unbeknownst to them, it had the tailings had asbestos-like fibers in it, not asbestos, but it was like asbestos, looked like it under a microscope, and they immediately spread across the entire surface of Lake Superior, which is not exactly a little lake.
Yeah,
And when
kind of
the
big.
sun shined on it, it made the entire lake look green.
Oh my gosh.
Meanwhile, a guy that became the head of the Environmental Protection Agency called the Pollution Control Agency in Minnesota under Democratic Governor Anderson, his background is his grandfather. I had something to do with mining in northern Minnesota. And I think it was the Rockefeller brothers owned the railroad to bring his product to market. And the Rockefeller brothers refused to ship his grandfather's iron ore, which resulted in him growing up fairly poor, where he could have grown up very, very rich. So he was really mad at the steel industry. So that's why he sued through the PCA, the Reserve Mining Company, which is north of Duluth in a little town called Silver Bay. And the uncertainty over their jobs caused many of the workers there's 5,000 of them, and their whole families lived there, caused a number of heart attacks and health issues and so forth. So I stepped in and employed Henry Kissinger's shuttle diplomacy. I would go from Silver Bay to Duluth to Cleveland, where the headquarters of Republic Steel was, to Washington, D.C. to meet with John Blotnick and his successor, Representative Jim Ovestar, and then back to St. Paul to meet with the governor. And I began to help work out and help resolve the dispute. So eventually they settled their legal dispute that had been in contention in the courts for about 7 years.
Wow. So
So
you're able to make that deal work. That's cool.
And once I was on an outward bound executive course, and I landed at the Duluth airport to hop in a van to go up to the Boundary Waters canoe area. And I alerted the media ahead of time that I was coming. So when I got off the airplane with my fellow people that were going to the outward bound, they're wondering, who is this guy? Because I was surrounded by the media, television cameras and lights, and the print media. And the headline of the Duluth Herald, they called me the Henry Kissinger of northern Minnesota.
Ooh.
So that with 25 cents, I still can't get a cup of coffee at
Right. But that was kind of cool, though. What an honor. I mean, Henry Kissinger, that's quite a label, man. That's wow.
So I got on the campaign committee for a former congressman from the first district of Minnesota, Al Quie, who, by the way, is the same district that our former vice presidential candidate for Minnesota came from, and he also represented that district. And Quie was on the education committee and was in Congress for 20 years, and he decided to come home and run for governor. So I wrote his energy position papers. I wrote his environmental position papers, his business climate papers, and his tax position papers. And then with about 3 weeks left in the campaign, his campaign manager was struggling, so he asked me to take over and manage the campaign.
Wow.
So I said, sure. And the polling that I got showed us behind by about 20 points. And my pollster was a fellow by the name of Roger Ailes, who later found Fox News.
You mean the loudest voice in the room?
Yeah. So Roger told me what issues were of concern to the people in the north and the central and the southern part of the state, and how important those issues are to people, which enabled me to change my messaging on a daily basis in terms of my media buys and in terms of the speeches of my surrogate speakers. And the result was 3 weeks later, we won by 10 percentage points.
Wow. So we had a 30-point turn.
Yeah.
In how much time?
3 weeks.
Wow. So what was it like working with Roger Ailes?
Well, I don't think I ever met him. I just got his data.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you didn't have a lot of interaction with him.
No. So after that, one of the major supporters of the Environmental Balance Association was the AFL-CIO, which was Democratic,
Sure.
DFL party, and the Farmers Bureau and one of their petrochemical companies were on my board. So out of their retribution, they fired me.
Oh.
And then a guy by the name of John Conley, who was riding in front of Kennedy when Kennedy was assassinated, former
The governor of Texas at the time.
went on to changed to Republican, went on to become Secretary of the Treasury, and he decided to run for president at the same time. So he asked me to run his presidential campaign in Minnesota, whose caucuses were the same night as the New Hampshire primaries. So I did.
What year was this?
This would have been 1979.
Okay. Okay.
But he wasn't doing too well in Minnesota, so the campaign fired me. They always blamed the staff rather than the candidate or the candidate's messaging.
Yeah, because you can't fire the candidate, right? So somebody's head's got to roll. Jeez.
So they fired me with about 2 to 3 weeks left in the caucuses, but nevertheless, we got 4 times as many delegates out of Minnesota that Connolly got out of
New Hampshire.
New Hampshire.
Wow.
We got 4 and New Hampshire got 1.
Wow. So could I ask you a couple of questions?
Sure.
Go back just a little bit. So growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up where you grew up?
Gee.
In Detroit?
Well, probably my model airplanes.
Yeah.
I had an Air Force of about 25 U-control model airplanes.
Wow.
Not necessarily the model airplanes. It might have been the glue, because this was before the what was it, Ambroid, and there's another kind of glue. And I would go down to the basement. We had a ping pong table down there. And I had all my airplanes in various forms of assembly, and I might have been getting high every.
Looking back, right?
Yeah.
So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Well, Bill Magruder was the most, starting when I
Yeah.
was 19. Before that, probably a teacher, Dewey, in my wood shop class at
Yeah.
Taft Junior High School. That's about all that I can think of off the top.
Amazing how teachers just change your life, you know? So was woodshop your favorite subject in high school?
Yes. I also did pretty good in math.
That's cool. That's
And
cool.
Underwater,
So
underwater craft was a lot of fun.
I got you. So So you decide after you graduate high school to go to Michigan. What made you decide to go to Michigan?
Well, I was in aeronautical technology at Cass Tech,
Right.
and I wanted to get into airplanes.
Okay.
And Michigan had a well-known aerospace engineering school.
Gotcha.
So I went there, and I was quite surprised to find that they had little emphasis on aeronautics. It was all on space.
Yeah.
And I asked around and found that there was a handshake deal between Michigan and Ohio State,
Mhm.
where Ohio State would focus on aeronautics and Michigan would focus on space.
Hmm.
And I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I might have gone to Ohio State.
Right.
But
You might be a Buckeye.
yeah, but Michigan, the tuition for Michigan for in-state was only $600 a year.
Wow.
Now it's probably about 600,000 a year.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's changed just a bit, right? That's
So
cool.
what I ended up taking in my junior year thermodynamics and engineering mechanics, and I made the mistake of sitting in the front row of my engineering mechanics class at 8 o'clock in the morning and sleeping. I ended up getting a D, and I was told that I have to retake 2 or 3 of these courses that I didn't do too good in, and I'd have to stay in school another semester. And I said, I don't want to do that. I'm just itching to get out of school.
Yeah.
And besides, the space program was winding down at the time, and the Vietnam War was winding down at the time. And there was about 150,000 unemployed aerospace engineers out in the marketplace. And some of them are having trouble getting a job driving a taxi.
Yeah. The market was kind of flooded.
Yeah. I'm saying, of what use is me learning thermodynamics, fluid
Right.
around a sphere, or engineering mechanics when you got all these other guys that know this stuff, they're unemployed.
Yeah.
So at about that time, a fellow by the name of Cy Ramo, the R in the company TRW,
Ooh.
convinced the National Science Foundation to fund a program for technically trained managers. So a course major called Interdisciplinary Engineering was created at the University of Michigan Engineering School. And I was allowed to take core engineering, management courses at the MBA school, economics, political science, journalism, and so forth. And I was in the journalism class. I learned how to run surveys, which later was useful in the political campaigns.
No kidding.
And essentially, I was being trained as a product manager.
Mhm.
The term was not used. Unfortunately, though, the 7 of us that graduated, about 6 months before we were graduate, I went to Dean Ragoni, who came out of the automotive industry, who was the dean of the engineering school. I said, look, you have these career fairs where Honeywell and Boeing and McDonnell Douglas and Texas Instruments and so forth all come on campus, Bendix, and they're looking for electrical engineers, they're looking for naval engineers, they're looking for industrial engineers. And not one of them have any idea that we have now 7 technically trained managers available for hire.
Yeah.
And I said, Dean Ragoni, if I write a letter for you, would you send it out to all of the companies that are coming here to recruit to let them know that this talent, this product that you've produced is available?
Mm-hmm.
He said, no.
Why?
I have no idea.
Wow.
So I have the same response when I get a fundraising letter from them.
Yeah. Kind of a no.
Yeah.
We're going to move on from that, right?
Yeah, I think it's hypocritical for
No
a
kidding.
school at any level to train somebody for a particular field and not assist with them getting a job as a result of it.
It makes no sense. They have the connections, and all he had to do was take a few minutes to help. He probably had staff that could write the letters, right? Rewrite the letters and send them out for him.
Yeah.
All he had to do was sign them and send them. I mean, that's just crazy. So is it true, because I heard something the other day on the news, that there was a private company that was looking to break the sound barrier?
Yeah.
Did they do that?
Yeah, it's called Boom, BOOM.
There you go.
Which is a stupid name for it, because the primary objection to the American SST was the sonic boom
Right.
over the country. And that was
Yeah,
banned.
scare people, right?
Yeah. Although the overpressure wasn't that much, it was overhyped as part of the environmental objections to the SST.
Right.
So they're flying out of I think it's Edwards Air Force Base or nearby,
Yeah.
Southern California. And about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, Friday was the first time that they exceeded the speed of sound. And I think they did it this past Tuesday. So if you Google Boom and find their website, you can get on their email list and get noticed whenever they run their test flights.
Yeah.
The aircraft they've got is a scale model. It's smaller than the one that they plan to build. I think the commercial one's going to hold about 80 passengers.
Yeah.
And I think several airlines have placed orders for the aircraft if once they get through flight certification with the FAA.
Yeah. So first time in history, is that correct?
Well, this would be a private company.
Yeah. So first time a private company did it. So when did we break the sound barrier as a government?
With Chuck Yeager. And
Chuck Yeager, right? Yeah. And that
Yeah.
was in the 50s?
Yeah, that was back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And that was an aircraft that was developed by a friend of mine, Kelly Johnson, who was head of the Lockheed Skunk Works at Edwards. And Kelly was an independent business unit,
Mhm.
which enabled him to develop an advanced aircraft like that and the SR-71s and a whole bunch of others faster, like in 18 months compared to Lockheed taking 7 years to get it done.
Yeah.
And my mentor, Bill Magruder, introduced me to Kelly.
Yeah.
My first conversation with him was when I was in Bill's office at the Department of Transportation, and Kelly called Bill and said, what can I do to help get the SST funding through Congress? And Bill says, Kelly, your wife just died. Don't you want to take some time off? He says, no, the only way to get over grief is a good hard work. Now, what can I do to help?
Wow. Wow. Something bigger than him, right? And he got to focus on something other than his grief.
Right.
Wow. Wow. What a guy. What a guy. So how long did you run political campaigns? It sounds like decades.
No, I stopped in 1980.
Oh, did you? Okay.
The
What
electric.
made you stop?
I got fired from the Conley job.
Sometimes that helps, right?
And Quee had promised me before the election and even on election night.
Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com, and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off.
That if he won, he would appoint me as the head of the Department of Energy in Minnesota.
Okay.
And he didn't do it. So he left me, and the environmentalists, of course, went after me like a dead goat.
Yeah.
And chewed me up and spit me out in all the media with no defense. He didn't show loyalty back to me in return for the loyalty that I showed to him.
Right.
And his problem was he was a born-again Christian, and he had prayer breakfasts every morning. And all the members of his prayer breakfast got appointed to senior government positions in the Quee government in Minnesota. So I left in February of 1980 and drove out to Silicon Valley, where I am now. And EPRI, Electric Power Research Institute, which is one of the funders of the Environmental Balance Association, introduced me to the PR agency for Hewlett Packard.
Oh, wow.
Russellman Associates, and they liked me in the interview, and they introduced me to the director of PR at HP, and they ended up hiring me to help them site new facilities around the country because they were running into community environmental opposition to their new factories.
Yeah.
So
And they were in a big expansion mode at that time.
yeah, I helped them site facilities in Northern California, Roseville, in north of Seattle, and in Research Triangle Park in North Carolina.
Wow.
So I wrote speeches for the President Lou Platt. I was massive in the media in Seattle over the Stevens Lake, I think it was, facility that we were trying to get built. In that instance, there was a citizen there in Everett that was opposing the facility. A bunch of doctors that lived near Lake Stevens didn't want it there because that was their quiet little home for their commute into Seattle. But I helped overcome the community opposition, gave the citizen that was leading the group some respect, and he backed off and dropped his opposition, and we were able to get the facility built, which is still operating today.
Yeah. So you literally have gone everywhere you've gone, you've solved problems.
Yeah.
It's what you do.
That's right. And that's what I like to do. I like to accomplish things, get things done.
Yeah. You can tell.
Meanwhile, back in Minnesota, Quee decided not to run for re-election in 1984 because his approval rating dropped to 4%.
Oh my gosh.
And the reason being is he didn't appoint a staff or a cabinet consisting of the people that helped him get elected and based upon the policies that they voted for: energy, environment, taxes, business climate. He just went off and reinvented the whole thing, threw all of the people away. And their philosophy at the time was let them fetch it on their own. Jimmy Carter did the same thing. And that's part of the reason why he could not run for re-election. He had not built up the loyalty that he needed in order to run a successful campaign.
Geez, that's terrible. So how long did you work for HP?
I was there a little over 2 years. And one of the first things that I noticed when I joined the PR department is they didn't have any word processing. Quite surprising because I had a word processor at FAST, I had a word processor at Environmental Balance Association. I had the first Xerox 700 word processor in the Conley campaign. And I was shocked that the only department in the entire company that knew how to type did not have word processing.
Unbelievable.
So I found an internal software program called Slate, which ran on our mini computer, the HP 3000, and introduced it to the 32 people of the PR department. Their productivity immediately significantly increased.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things about HP is you could move laterally. So I was able to move over to the Information Networks division in the Office Systems Product Management Group and got the responsibility as a product manager for a unified user interface across many computers and PCs, and for a executive report writer that sat on top of a data dictionary and a relational database. And then as a result of that, I was also got trained as a classical HP product manager.
Right.
And HP product management came from Procter & Gamble in 1932, and it evolved out of this notion of brand management. And Dave Packard and Bill Hewlett picked that up in 1938, when they started HP. And the one thing they did do is they dropped the authority that the brand manager had. The brand manager had the budget to pay for the market research, the marketing, the sales tools, and so forth, while the product manager has to use their negotiation and mediation skills to get the resources they need in order to get their job done. So Apple recruited me because I was an HP product manager. They recognized the value of that. And they asked me to bring to market the first hard disk drive on a personal computer. And it was really cheap. It was only $3,500. And it had an enormous...
$3,500 in 84?
Yeah.
That was kind of a lot of money, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what about, I don't know, 10 times that today.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh.
but it had a lot of space. It was almost 5 megabytes in space.
Yeah.
And no one could understand why they would ever need 5 megabytes of space for anything. And we just consumed that in the last minute and a half of this podcast.
Yeah, we did. Yeah, we did.
So they sent me off to the big computer show in Las Vegas. I introduced the profile, got sales going pretty good, and then showed the uh, uh, personal computer systems group how to manage a new operating system that had to be developed for the Apple II. Because when Steve Wozniak wrote the operating system for the Apple II, he did it in about 3 weeks because he wanted to go to a trade show in Las Vegas. He'd never been to Las Vegas before.
Mhm.
And up until then, the Apple II's mass storage was a cassette tape.
Right.
So they asked him to write a disk operating system to access the Shugart 5.25-inch floppy disk. But he never imagined that they would have as much space as 5 megabytes.
Right.
So I helped drive the development of the ProDOS operating system by using a Gantt chart, which I learned about from my experience with NASA and
Mhm.
shuttle, and showed them how to manage. And in fact, I bet Dick Houston something, and he bet a valuable coin that he had. I said, "Look, you got 1 million lines of code here. You'll never ship on time."
Mhm.
And I pulled out a Gantt chart every week that I would produce on the yet to be released Lisa computer, which was really
Yeah.
good graphics. And I would draw a vertical line at today's date. And the 20 or 30 engineers in the room that we would meet weekly would instantly see which people are on schedule, behind schedule, or ahead of schedule. And of course, the ones ahead of schedule got lots of kudos for doing a better than expected job. And the
Mhm.
ones that were behind schedule got their butts in gear. And Dick ended up shipping it 3 days late.
Wow. Wow.
Most other projects would be, months, if not years
Yeah.
late.
Yeah. So what was it like working for Steve Jobs?
Well, I didn't work directly for him. He was the Apple III product manager that started it back in 1980, and this was in 1983. And so they asked me to move over from the peripherals division and the hard drives and the floppy drives to the personal computer systems division
Mhm.
and become the group product manager for the Apple III. I said, sure, but there's all kinds of rumors circulating around the country that you're just going to cancel the product line. Said, no, we won't be doing that. We'll give you an 18-month runway, and then we'll make a decision. So after a week or two or three on the job, Steve went with the executive committee on a retreat down in Pajara Dunes, California, which is near Monterey.
Mhm.
The earthquake hit, and they all went running from the conference room. And then eventually, sometime during that meeting, they voted to cancel the Apple III.
Hmm.
And I didn't know about it, and my division manager, Paul Daly, didn't know anything about it. So we found out about it later. And a week or two, I had a little office cubicle, which was very famous in Silicon Valley. You just had these half or two-thirds tall movable walls from
Mhm.
Herman Miller. But mine was between a bunch of others, and it had a dog leg of about 45 degrees to the left. So it was about 4 feet wide and maybe 10, 15 feet long, with the last 5 feet was a dog leg. So I
Mhm.
brought my putter in and a little thing, they would catch the golf ball and spit it back to you.
Mhm.
Is excellent practicing for golf. And then for some reason, this was in the Triangle building on Stevens Creek next to the 280 Expressway.
Mhm.
And it was a kind of a funny building. It just had three sides. And I noticed that whenever people would go into a meeting, they would say, I have three things to say about that. Not four, not five. They're affected by the geometry.
Mhm.
And when you got off the elevator, it didn't matter whether you go to the left or the right. You end up at the same place.
Right. That's the
So,
way that thing works.
so I went over to the Mariani building, which is over on De Anza Boulevard, near 280, which is the corporate headquarters. I was in there for some meeting for something. And I was coming out of the meeting. A lady by the name of Ida Cole ran out and grabbed me. She was at the time the director of marketing for Apple.
Mhm.
And later she went on to be VP of international for Microsoft. Made
Yeah.
a lot of lot more money in her career and opened a dress shop about 10 years ago in Seattle. And she says, John wants to talk to you. And being the smart ass that I was, I said, John who? She says, John Sculley. I said, he's president, right? And she says, yeah. I said, yeah, I've met him a couple of times. Okay. So she ushers me into this little conference room. John's sitting at the end of his tiny conference room table. Ida sits down across from me. To my left is Joe Graziano, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer of Apple at the time. And he later went on to be the CFO at Sun.
Yeah.
And came back to Apple when Steve came back to Apple.
Mm-hmm.
And kitty corner for me was Del Yoakum, who was the VP of manufacturing, and he later became president. So Sculley looks at me and says, Dave, we've got a problem. I said, what's that? And he says, we've got $30 million worth of piece parts for the Apple III spread between Cork, Ireland, Dallas, Texas, and Singapore, which is where the manufacturing facilities were for Apple at the time. Mm-hmm. And Jobs had convinced the executive committee to cancel the product line because Steve Jobs 1.0 did not understand the notion of cannibalizing your own product. Mm-hmm. He felt that the Apple III occupied a space in the office business market that has yet to be introduced, yet to be shipped. Macintosh wanted to occupy. So if you get rid of the Apple III, then he'll have that market all to himself.
Wow.
Well, coincidentally enough, when I was researching my book, Building and Sailing Great Products, which, by the way, plug here, is up on Amazon. Just Google or search for my name on Amazon.
Right.
Jobs sought out Dave Packard for some mentoring around 1989. And I knew Dave fairly well because I handled his personal PR as chairman of the board when I was in corporate PR of HP.
Right.
And after Jobs got fired in 1985 because he did a horrible job of end-of-lifing the Lisa, it actually affected the price of the stock. He then went on to introduce his Macintosh in January of 84. And when sales of the Mac dropped to 4 units in January of 1985, the board and Sculley got very annoyed with him. And then he tried to have a palace revolt and throw Sculley out and put himself in as president, yet he had no performance abilities. So he left Apple, Jobs did, and he started a little company called Next.
Yeah.
And by that time, I was the associate director of the personal computer industry service at a market research firm called DataQuest. The lady who was a reporter for Business Week came into my office and said, what do you think of Next? I said, you mean last? And sure enough, he had dispositioned that product in the marketplace. And as a result, he failed.
Yeah.
Around that time, he bought into Pixar, and Pixar was failing. Yeah. So I got some advice from Dave Packard. So when Jobs 2.0 came back into into Apple in the late 1990s, his whole approach changed. He discovered people's values and wanted to follow them. Steve Jobs 1.0 had no values and did not follow them. In fact, there was one story where somebody got on an elevator with him, and Jobs asked him, what do you do? And the person explained it. Jobs said, you're fired. A few months or a year later, Jobs is on an elevator. The same guy gets onto the elevator. And I'm going, why did he get on the elevator again?
Yeah, I thought you were fired, right?
Yeah, that's what Jobs said. I thought you were fired.
Right.
So Sculley's sitting there in the office, or the conference room off his office, and he's looking at a super VisiCalc from Lotus 123 spreadsheet, which only ran on the Apple III because we had the most memory of PCs at the time, 28 or 256 kilobytes. And so it was a huge spreadsheet. The whole company was run on Apple IIIs at that time. He says, Dave, we have $30 million worth of piece parts spread amongst those 3 manufacturing facilities. What should we do about it? And I said, what do you mean we, paleface? And he didn't laugh. And of course, the other 3 people in the room, they were shocked that I would say something like that.
Yeah.
And I said, you don't know the story? And John says, no. I said, well, there's the story of the Lone Ranger who wore all white, and he rode a white horse called Trigger. and he had an Indian sidekick by the name of Tonto.
Right.
I tell this story like when I teach Cisco product management and product marketing here in the United States and in India. I have to say an American Indian, not an
not Indian, right?
So they're surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians, and Lone Ranger turns to Tonto, and Tonto says, "We're surrounded by 10,000 yelling, screaming Indians, and all they want to do is scalp us. What should we do, Tonto?" And Tonto says, "What do you mean, we, paleface?" Using the insult for the white man that wears a mask.
Kind of, yeah.
And so Sculley snickered, I think, and people laughed. And he says, "Well, what should we do?" I said, "Look, you gave me all the responsibility for the product line, but no authority." Going back to the mistake of the HP product management model.
Yeah.
That I just tried to put together a promotion to sell Apple IIIs, and I'd have to take the promotion that I would design to a divisional Marcom group. You would take it to a corporate Marcom group, who would then take it to a corporate marketing group, who would then take it to a sales force and interface with the manufacturer's reps, who would then take it to the salesperson, the manufacturing reps, would then take it to the principal of a dealer, who would then will take it to a person on the floor in the dealership trying to sell the computer when someone comes through the door. And I said, when I started here, I also took a job part-time at a computer store in Fremont, just to see what's happening all the way at the other end.
On the ground, yeah.
Ground. And
that's smart.
I was finding the value proposition, the value, the product positioning, the messaging that we as product managers at Apple were putting together were not getting to the floor of sales to affect the sales. I said, you need to give me the authority commensurate with the responsibility. And he says, why? I said, well, if you look at the book, The Soul of a New Machine, where I think it was Alpha General wanted to develop a new mini computer, and the corporate offices kept shooting it down when it was under development there. So they moved them to Raleigh, Durham, North Carolina from Boston. I told him the story of the IBM PC, where the salespeople at IBM were getting such huge commissions off their mainframe sales. They were afraid that the IBM PC would cannibalize their commissions. So they moved the development all the way to Boca Raton, Florida, as far away as they could in the United States, but stay in the same time zone. Then I told him about Kelly Johnson and the X1 and the XR71 and how he could get a new high-tech airplane built and flying in 18 months instead of 7 years. Right. Sculley says, I agree with you. He says, when I was president of Pepsi, he was president of domestic Pepsi, not international Pepsi.
Right.
And he went to a cocktail party in Connecticut, just north of New York, where he lived. And there was the president of Xerox. And he said, I was having a drink with him. And I said, how come Xerox doesn't have a personal computer? I'm saying to myself, that's right, Xerox, they never do anything original.
Right.
And he says to the president of Xerox, I've got a Canon personal copier on my desk. Why don't you have one? The Xerox president said, we put 100 of our best engineers on it. We're still a year away from shipping.
Yeah.
Canon put 10 of their best engineers on it, and we left them alone, and they left them alone, and they're shipping now. And now that you have that.
Yeah.
So I said, give me the authority, and we'll go out there and market and sell and support and service and train on the Apple III. He said, okay, make me a proposal. So I got about 80 people in the company to contribute information about manufacturing, engineering, and marketing. And then a core group of 7 to 12 people, and we put together a final business plan, about 80 pages long. And on July 15th, 1983, I presented that business plan to the executive committee of Apple. That's a day will live in infamy, at least in my mind. And unbeknownst to me, sitting in the back of the room was a lady by the name of Ann Bowers, who was VP of HR. She's also VP of HR of Intel. And she was married to Bob Noyce, one of the founders of Intel.
Yeah.
I think I again found in my research for building and sailing great products that she was instrumental in getting Intel to accept a set of values for Intel, which was adopted off of HP's values called the HP Way. And she, in turn, put together a committee of various people throughout Apple in 78, 79, and they wrote a set of Apple values. which on your orientation day at Apple, just like my orientation day at HP, we spent an hour or two discussing those values and what they mean to you. And what it means is when everybody at Apple and everybody at HP would go into a room to make a joint decision, they were coming from the same playbook, from the same set of values. So some of the Apple values that we were trained on was have empathy for our customers, was to have achievement, make a positive social contribution. We valued individual performance and team spirit. We valued innovation and vision. We valued individual growth, and most importantly, quality and good management. So I laid out in this meeting on July 15th, 1983, the options that the executive committee had. One was to let the market decide. The other was to shut the product line down. And I believe very strongly in let the market decide, because when I was in aerospace engineering back at Michigan, 3 of the astronauts, I think it was for Apollo 15, were all from Michigan Aerospace Engineering. Dave Scott was the commander, and I forget off the top of my head the other 2. So the department leased a 707 and flew us, a couple 100 of us aerospace engineering students to, I think it was called Cape Kennedy by then, watch the launch of that mission to the moon. After that, they piled us into a bus and drove us from there to Orlando, which is like a 2 or 3 hour bus ride, to meet with the chief Imagineer for Disney. He was responsible for designing and building out the Disney World, which had not yet opened. And we're sitting there, and he gives us a little lecture of what they're doing and how to do it. And of course, they're called Imagineers. You're supposed to be innovative as opposed to engineers. And one of my fellow students in the back of the room asked the chief Imagineer, how did they decide where to put the sidewalks? Which I thought was an entirely stupid question. And most of us laughed. And the chief Imagineer shut us down real quick. He says, no, that's a very important question. He says, we've got about 100 Imagineers working on this project, and we argued about where to put the sidewalks for 3 days.
Wow.
Finally, one of the junior Imagineers says, let's not put in any sidewalks. And the other Imagineer said, why? He says, we're not smart enough to know what the market wants. We're not smart enough to know where people are going to walk.
Wow.
They planted grass everywhere at Disney World, and the junior Imagineer says, let's just wait about 3 weeks and see where the grass is worn down. And
see where the trails are.
And that's where we'll put in the sidewalk.
Wow.
So out of grins, when I was building and sailing green products, I Googled Disney World to see where the sidewalks were. And if you do that, you look at all the pictures, you don't see any grass. They ran sidewalks everywhere.
It's all
little fences around the bushes, I guess, to protect them from the peeing dogs or something like that, or from people walking through them. And it was funny, a few years ago, I went to Barcelona and went north to Girona, Spain. I wanted to have dinner at El Cello del Can Roca, which at the time was the second best restaurant in the world. I was on my way to Botswana to teach the Botswanian telecommunications company how to do product management and product success. And as I was walking to the restaurant, they had built a sidewalk alongside the road, but it kind of intersected in a triangle with a little creek. Nobody was walking on the sidewalk. They had worn the grass thin alongside the creek, which is the shortcut from the sidewalk to the other sidewalk. So I said, I laid those options out to the executive committee. And at that critical point of the meeting, Floyd Kwame, who was the executive vice president of marketing and sales, said, Dave, if we pick the option of shutting the product line down, or we pick the option to let the market decide, and a dealer calls you, what would you say? I said, well, if you let the market decide, thinking back upon my experience at Disney, I said, I'll tell the dealer that so long as you continue to sell the product and service it, we'll continue to support you, we'll continue to market it, we'll continue to enhance it. And that's what I'll tell the dealer. But if you guys decide to shut the product line down, I'll give the dealer your phone number, Floyd. And Everybody laughed, and they got the message that making that decision at that point in time of the life of the Apple III and wasting $30 million, which would probably be well over $300 million today,
Yeah.
would a substantial cut out of the balance sheet and the stock option prices for all the people in that room, not to mention the fact that it would violate key tenets of Apple values.
Yeah.
So I got a call about a week later from Ken Zerbe, who was the former CFO, and he just came back to Cupertino for being Apple's general manager in Europe. He says, I hear you know a little bit about the Apple III. I would like you to run a separate division, independent, with full authority for the Apple III product line, which was not only the Apple III, but also 500 associated hardware and software products, some from Apple, many from third-party vendors that invested their resources in trying to make money off the Apple III.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd like you to be the business unit manager. I said, I can't be the general manager. He says, no, you have to be the business unit manager. I said, so you want to call me a bum for short?
Yeah.
And they refused to budge. So I took the bum job. They gave me $4 million, 18 people, my own office, uniquely in the same building where the first offices of Apple were, Banley 6 off of Banley Drive in Cupertino. I had the whole first floor for my team. Next to us was the team of engineers writing the operating system for the Macintosh.
Mm-hmm.
And we went out, and 11 months, we sold 25,000 Apple IIIs out of the 75,000 that were sold, generated hundreds of millions of dollars worth of profits, protected the investment of the 50,000 people that had bought Apple IIIs before at an average selling price of about $7,000, which would be about $30,000 today. And they respected the fact that we protected their investment and phased out the product line after all the inventory was gone, and sold them all off. Had enough profit. We were a cash cow before the Boston Consulting Group knew what to call that, and financed in great part the Macintosh development, and kept about 1,000 to 1,500 overpaid Apple employees employed for the next year or so.
That's what I used to sell Macintosh computers as an Apple reseller. Nothing like it. Listen, we're out of time, but tell us the name of your book again, and it's on Amazon, right?
Yeah, Amazon, just search for my name, David Fradin. It's building and sailing great products. There's also organizing and managing and sailing great products. There's also a book published by Wiley, the book publisher, used in executive education courses at universities, called Successful Product Design and Management Toolkit. Perfect. And then there's my latest book in honor of my father, whose name was Hyman, called Letters from My Jaime. And it's the story of his letters that he wrote home during World War II.
Oh, that's awesome. David Fradin, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. This has been amazing. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate you.
Thanks for putting up with me.
No, you're awesome. This was awesome. It's the fastest hour. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.